It's like the movie poster of Jaws of the girl swimming and the sharks coming up underneath her. Look, 40% of Bitcoin are owned in America, as of late last year at least. If people are taking money out of America and going elsewhere, it's selling NASDAQ, but then it's also probably selling Bitcoin. We want to go to a wartime footing to compete, which everyone says we want to do. No one wants to do the hard part, which is you got to kill the bond market on a real basis. The Treasury market will always blow up in 7 to 10 days if we try to do anything extreme without devaluing it first against gold. And that's what needs to happen.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Market House. Joining me for this macro session is Luke Gromen, founder and president of Forest for the Trees. Hi, Luke. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me on, Maggie. It's great to be here.
It's a really interesting time to catch up with you. Gosh, it's been one heck of a year so far. We were only 30 days in, and so much has already happened. So just want to get your thoughts on the most recent drama, and everyone's still kind of coming to terms with that massive sell-off we saw in metals. Silver down hugely on the last trading day of January. Gold also down, though not as much. It seems like things are still kind of rocky as we record this. What's your view of what's happening? Is that connected to some larger macroeconomic issue, or is this just sort of an air pocket for an asset class that just went straight to the moon?
I think it is a little bit of both. I mean, it was getting pretty frothy, of course. So you were kind of due for a pullback. With that said, the violence of the pullback, people have noted how historic those levels were. I think it is with, Warsh's nomination, which I think surprised a lot of people, and the speculation that he is a hawk, which I think it's way too early to make that assumption, was sort of the nominal reason for the sell-off. But I think it was ultimately sort of, the pin that pricked a frothy situation. Now, with that said, I don't think a whole lot has really changed fundamentally for metals, gold, silver. I mean, we come in today, Trump just announced a $12 billion critical minerals stockpile, unprecedented in U.S. history. So let's talk through the accounting of what that is. The United States is going to print dollars or sell bonds to buy metals because we're short. So I think the situation in the short run got a little too frothy, but, and let's be clear. Silver is on the list of those critical minerals. So I don't know if the United States will be explicitly buying silver or not. But boy, oh boy, that's what I would be doing if I was them, right? We're short silver. We declared it a critical metal. Oops, you run it up, you run it down. Now they can wave it in and who knows if that's the plan. It's completely speculative on my part, but if they came to me 2 months ago and said, okay, Luke, we're short silver in a bad way, which I hear they are short a lot of critical minerals in a bad way. And we've been saying that for some time. Luke, what would you do? Like, oh, okay, well, it's kind of a standard practice, Wall Street pump and dump that appears it just ran, right? It's like you run it up, you crash it, and then you wave in what you need at the lower price. And so, everyone keeps saying Bessent is a Wall Street guy. Well, to me, perhaps that's some of what we just watched. But it doesn't change the fundamentals of we're short metal, a lot of different critical minerals and metals. And for gold, I think it hasn't changed anything for gold. The crosswinds we came into the year with are all still there and getting worse, and quite possibly last week and certainly month to date has made those crosswinds much more acute, much worse, and I think that's very bullish for gold.
Yeah. So first of all, really interesting theory. And I think that everyone that loves to think the Trump administration is scattered and all over the place, maybe they are, but what you just described was, catching the market off sides in a large way. We'll talk a little bit more about sort of just the policy risk of a sort of interventionist government all around, but that's super interesting if that's the case. Is the issue with minerals, so they're doing this stockpile, or so they say they will. Again, we got to see it, right? Like they say a lot of things. Is the issue the supply of them, or is the issue the getting the refining and getting the rest of that supply chain? Like, where's the bottleneck? Because I thought it was the latter.
No, you're right. It is absolutely the refining. It's the as it relates to the national security side. And it sounds like that's where it is in silver at the moment too, by the way. But that's the national security critical minerals side is absolutely the refining. And that's kind of par for the course a little bit with this administration, right? Like you just said, which is they say a lot of things and they're always positive and sort of superlative. And that's sort of Trump's way. And I get it. And end of the day, a lot of this stuff still got to get shipped to China to get refined. And if you want to bring the refining here, my understanding is you got to go to China and buy the refining technology. And so we're frantically trying to do that at some sort of scale. There's some signs of real progress, right? Elon has just opened a lithium refinery in Texas. It took him 3 years, and it took him, and that's Elon, right? Elon sort of is the opposite of government. It's just like, no regard for, regulations. And it's not that he doesn't have no regard for regulation. He is uniquely gifted at finding cracks in the regulation, right? Where he'll put a refinery in between on a property line where like sort of it's under nobody's jurisdiction, and so he can get through faster, or can play the two off against each other. So, well, fine, we'll just move it here and give them all the jobs back and forth. So my point being is that if it takes Elon 3 years to have it's an additive, no question. Is it a positive? Absolutely. Is it enough to cover our lithium needs? Not really. And it took him 3 years. And that was starting from 3 years ago, where, of course, he wasn't competing with the AI boom, metal shortages, trade war where China's holding stuff back. Point being is, the refining to bring it back, your best case is probably 3 to 5 years. There's maybe some small stuff you can do in certain critical mineral, certain rare earths, maybe, on military bases. You could probably do faster. Not that I'd want to be living on that base or downwind of it, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. That in this country, people who live in those neighborhoods are sort of letting their voice be known. But why wouldn't the Trump administration? I mean, this is supposed to be the administration that was in favor of deregulation, of fast tracking, drill baby drill. Okay, it's not oil, but why wouldn't the announcement be about that? Because it's harder.
It's one of these things, right? And I'm not an attorney, but I've got attorney friends. It's, never ask a question in a courtroom that you don't know the answer to, right? And we don't have a lot of engineers, but we got a lot of attorneys in the administration. And so why wouldn't they? They know the answer. And when you're an attorney, you don't ask a question in a courtroom that you don't want the answer to. And I think that's what's happening, which is, if they start talking about that changes the discussion entirely from, hey, chest thumping America to, oh my God, we're dependent. We are so dependent on the Chinese. It's not even funny. They have us by the short hairs, to be polite, on all of this stuff. And it's going to take at least 10 to 20 years to get there. That is not the message. And I would argue that the public markets would not take that news well. And I think that's kind of right. Like, that would have serious implications, I think, for markets, for the dollar. And I think that's why they're not doing it. Yeah.
So the spin around Warsh is that he's someone that is, you mentioned Hawk, that he's going to ensure the Fed remains independent. He's going to steer policy based on market conditions, not what the president wants, maybe a reformer as well. Is that an accurate read? You seemed skeptical about the hawkish part.
Yeah, I'm 100% skeptical for numerous reasons, right? So number one, I remember sitting in the seat I'm sitting in here today, and people saying, well, Doge, Elon's going to come in and do Doge. Mm-hmm. And nobody's really tried to cut spending, and no one's as good as at Elon. And they're going to cut $2 trillion. And I just remember going, yeah. And you can find me chapter and verse or just saying like there's no friggin' way. And of course, there was no friggin' way, because the math is the math. And I feel kind of the same way about the Warsh Hawk thing. It's great. And the 6th grade math tells me there's no friggin' way, number one. But then number two, people want to see what they want to see, which is he's a hawk. And I think that narrative is very useful to this administration for the moment, right? We were seeing the dollar really sell off. We were seeing, gold starting to go asymptotic on short-term chart. I think there are elements in the administration that see that narrative as useful. But the reality is that Warsh co-wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal with Stan Druckenmiller, who was another one held out as, hey, we're finally going to have market discipline. You can go to the Wall Street Journal, December 2018, and the two of them co-wrote an op-ed begging for Fed liquidity because bank stocks were 15% off the highs and credit markets were tightening up a little bit. And by their admission, the economy's still doing fine. And sure enough, the Fed, Powell famously pivoted, and away we went. So, and 6 months later, Fed was cutting rates. So I really push back a bit on Warsh as a hawk because the math, the math simply doesn't math. He can't be a hawk. And so, I think I equated it for clients last week to, I was during my workouts last week, I was watching the Turning Point Vietnam movie on Netflix or documentary. And it's really good. But the one thing I equated it to was in 1968, Johnson replaced General William Westmoreland with General Creighton Abrams. And it changed the narrative for a second, but the reality was that 2 years later in the Pentagon Papers, we found out that the United States government knew that they could not win Vietnam in 1965 or 1966. And so it was kind of like, okay, we're going to replace Westmoreland and we'll get new blood. And then we're going to fight, different, and we'll move toward. We still lost. And more boys had to die. And it was all kind of a waste. And so I kind of look at this in the same light of Warsh, Powell, saying to bring it forward to today. Remember, a year ago, we were hearing, Besant's going to term out the debt. Yellen was irresponsible by issuing all those bonds at the short end. And Besant got into his seat and de facto went, not only did he not term it out, but he accelerated by, he doubled the pace of Treasury buybacks, mostly at the front end. So again, it's one of these things where, narrative management is super important in the short run. And I think as investors, it's important if you're a short-term trader to not get caught positioning wise. But if you're somebody who's got a longer term view, it's just, go make another bowl of popcorn, go buy another 6-pack, crack one open and watch, because the math is the math.
One of the things we saw, and for the reasons you just stated, it sort of made me scratch my head a little bit. So, the debasement trade is off the table.
It's paused for a moment. It's going to be back on.
Yeah.
It has to
be.
Yeah.
What are you saying? I know you get this question all the time. First of all, how are you feeling in this moment? Because so much of what you and, those of you who've been warning about this for a long time, it's sort of happening now. Or you're sort of starting to see those warnings and those concerns show up in real life, in real time. How are you feeling about that?
Alarmed on some level. We have a very small window in this country. We can do the debasement trade, and we can significantly devalue the real value of our debt, restructure our balance sheet. And we've probably got maybe a couple year window to do it. And if we don't do that, if we decide to try to bring in a hawk who's going to maintain Fed independence, then look, China's going to win. They are. They're going to. And when I say, what does that look like? What I mean is they already make way too much of our military for us. They're going to make it all in 5-10 years. We are the Fed independence thing. Look, why would I invest in capacity here in the United States with a dollar that is wildly uncompetitive? Right now, the Chinese can make a nuclear power plant for 87% cheaper than the Americans can make it. And that's a gigawatt to a gigawatt. We're going to lose the AI race to the Chinese. if we don't do this in the next 2 years. And that do this is significantly devalue the debt by basically some version of writing down the debt, probably against gold, in my opinion, that has a much weaker dollar. People say, well, we've got the better technology. Great. We don't have the grid. And you're seeing that everywhere. You know, it's you can have the awesomest chip in the world and the best IP in the world. If you don't have the power, you got nothing. You got nothing. And the Chinese, in the last 4 years, have built more electric grid capacity than we have in this country in total. And it's newer grid. And so they've got, you know, at the end of the day, they're not that far behind us. Our top guys all say they're not that far behind us. And if I'm the Chinese, this is how I'm playing it. Just keep doing what I'm doing. Don't do anything dumb. Don't get anything involved in Taiwan. And just wait.